Hello, and welcome to the African American Hour. I'm Rosemary Onkwe, bringing you readings from the following publications: Blavity Health, The Voice News Service, Ebony, Yahoo Sports, The Griot, and Huff Post. Today we'll begin our reading from an article from The Voice titled Free Tool Library Helps Kansas City Residents Grow Gardens, Save Money, by The Voice News Service, May 11th, 2026. A community resource in Kansas City is helping residents grow gardens, maintain neighborhoods, and tackle outdoor projects without spending hundreds of dollars on tools they may only use a few times a year. The Cultivate KC Urban Agriculture Tool Library, operating out of the Ivanhoe Neighborhood Council, gives community members free access to farm and garden equipment. The program is designed for urban farmers, community gardeners, and neighborhood residents who want to grow food or improve outdoor spaces, but may not have the money or storage space for costly tools. Available equipment ranges from simple hand tools like hoes, rakes, shears, and trowels to larger power tools including weed eaters, edgers, blowers, and trimmers. The library also includes specialty tools such as seeders for planting gardens and post hole diggers for installing fences. The idea behind the program is simple: share expensive equipment so more people can grow food and improve their neighborhoods. Membership is free for adults age 18 and older with valid identification, thanks to support from organizations including the Hall Family Foundation and USDA Urban Agriculture Innovation Projects. Members can borrow up to 5 tools at a time for as long as 7 days. Tools must be reserved online and picked up by appointment on Tuesdays and Thursdays between 4 and 6 p.m. While most tools are completely free to borrow, some larger pieces of equipment require refundable deposits. Borrowers are expected to return tools clean and in good working condition. Cultivate KC says the tool library helps remove one of the biggest barriers facing urban agriculture: access to equipment. A tool library is a community service that eliminates the need to buy expensive or large equipment that is only used once a season or for one-time projects, the organization explains on its website. The program is based in Midtown Kansas City and aims to support both home gardening and larger neighborhood growing projects as interest in local food production continues to grow. Cultivate KC is located at 3700 Woodland, KCMO. To see the complete inventory of available tools and to reserve a tool, go to https://www.cultivate.kc.org/tool-library. For questions, email Emily Kovar, Kovar, Emily@cultivatekc.org. The next article is titled Your Complete Guide to the 2026 FIFA World Cup, written by Calum Sutherland and Tiago Ventura. Yahoo Sports and Time, May 26, 2026. Taking place across U.S., Canada, and Mexico, the 2026 FIFA World Cup is fast approaching. Arguably, the most anticipated event in soccer, the tournament, which comes around every 4 years, will see 48 countries compete across 104 games over a 5.5-week period. It's the second time in history that the U.S. will serve as a host country, but this year's contest has already prompted controversy due to questions over Iran's participation amid the ongoing war, visa concerns for fans hoping to watch the U.S. matches, and steep ticket prices. As anticipation builds, here's everything you need to know about the tournament. When and where is the World Cup taking place, and how can you watch? The World Cup will kick off June 11th in Mexico City, where one of 3 opening ceremonies will take place, followed by the first game of the tournament between Mexico and South Africa. Throughout the tournament, matches will be played across the 3 host countries. Mexico City, Guadalajara, and Monterrey will host the matches in Mexico. Vancouver and Toronto will welcome the matches taking place in Canada. The rest of the matches will be played in the U.S. with Atlanta, Boston, Dallas, Houston, Kansas City, Los Angeles, Miami, New York, New Jersey, Philadelphia, Seattle, and San Francisco hosting fixtures. The hotly anticipated final on July 19th will be played at the MetLife Stadium in Rutherford, New Jersey. The final will also include the first World Cup halftime show, an event that's already drawing comparisons to the Super Bowl tradition. Soccer fans were given a taste at last year's Club World Cup final, also played at the MetLife. For audiences in the U.S., all matches will be available to watch live on Fox Sports. 70 matches will be broadcast on the Fox channel, with the other 34 on the Fox Sports 1 channel, FS1. Tubi Fox Corporation's free ad-supported streaming platform will simulcast 2 matches free of charge and without requiring an account. The tournament opener and the United States men's national soccer team opening game against Paraguay. Spanish language viewers can access coverage of all 104 games through NBC's Peacock streaming service if they are Peacock Premium or Premium Plus subscribers. On TV, 92 matches will be broadcast on Telemundo, with the remaining 12 available to watch on Universal. This is the first time the World Cup will feature 48 teams, so the format is slightly different. Teams have been drawn into 12 groups of 4, with nations from the same group playing each other once. The top 2 from each group, as well as the 8 best third-place teams, will all progress to the knockout phase. The 32 teams will compete in a knockout format until the final on July 19th. The U.S. national team will face its first group game against Paraguay in Los Angeles on June 12th at 6 p.m. local time. The next game will be against Australia in Seattle on June 19th, followed by the final group stage game against Turkey in Los Angeles on June 25th. I think they're a very physical squad, and that probably works for the conditions. Soccer journalist and author Jonathan Wilson tells Time of the U.S. team, pointing towards the high temperatures expected, similar to the Club World Cup last year. However, he argues there are 4 teams who obviously stand above the rest, naming Spain, France, England, and Argentina as contenders to watch. This year there will be 3 opening ceremonies, one in each of the host countries. The ceremony in Mexico will see an array of artists, including Alejandro Fernandez, Belinda, Danny Ocean, J Balvin, Balvin, Lila Downs, Downs, Los Angeles Azules, Mana, and Tyla perform on June 11th, starting 90 minutes before kickoff. Toronto will host a second ceremony on June 12th, featuring Alanis Morissette, Alicia Cara, Eliana, Jesse Reyes, Michael Bublé, Nora Fatihi, Fatehi, Sanjoy Vega Dream, William Prince. That same day, Los Angeles will host its own ceremony with Katy Perry, Future, Anita, Lisa, Rema, and Tyler are set to perform. There's also much buzz about the final, which will see a World Cup halftime show. Curated Coldplay Chris Martin. The lineup will feature performances from Shakira, Madonna, and BTS. On May 27th, the Attorneys General of New York and New Jersey said they had issued subpoenas to FIFA over the sports governing body's ticketing practices. New Jersey AG Jennifer Davenport and New York AG Letitia James are seeking information about FIFA's ticketing practices and are specifically requesting details about ticketing practices for 8 World Cup matches hosted in New Jersey, including the World Cup final on July 19, 2026, read the accompanying press release. Recent press reports indicate that fans may have been misled about the locations of the seats they were purchasing, and FIFA's public statements and ticket releases may have contributed to soaring prices. Since last September, FIFA has sold match tickets in different phases, the last of which is the current last-minute sales phase that began on April 1 due to last up until the day of the tournament. But the steep price of most tickets across matches from the group stage to the final has sparked criticism. Earlier in May, President Donald Trump was asked about paying a potential $1,000 for a ticket to the U.S. team's opening game against Paraguay. "I did not know that number," said Trump. "I would certainly like to be there, but I wouldn't pay it either, to be honest with you." As of May 27th, the only available ticket on FIFA's website for the final on July 19th cost $35,000. On the FIFA Marketplace resale platform, the cheapest ticket for the final comes in at $8,739. More desirable resale seats have been listed for millions of dollars. The eye-watering prices have largely been attributed to U.S. competitive pricing practices. "We are in the market in which entertainment is the most developed in the world, so we have to apply market rates," said FIFA President Gianni Infantino on May 5th. The approach has been criticized by some soccer fans, with one Europe-based soccer fan group calling FIFA's strategy a monumental betrayal. In the past, a ticket was this sort of golden key to this great experience, but now it's just a commodity to be traded, argues Wilson. Infantino has framed the World Cup as a chance for soccer to unite the world, promising that the 2026 offering will be the most inclusive and greatest ever. As many as 10 million visitors are expected to travel to the U.S. for the soccer spectacular, but there are concerns about visas and restrictions in light of the Trump administration's hardline immigration crackdown. Many fans welcomed the Trump administration's decision in mid-May to waive visa bonds for ticket holders from countries that have qualified for the World Cup. Ticket holders from Algeria, Cape Verde, Ivory Coast, Senegal, and Tunisia were deemed exempt from the visa bonds following the adjustment. The visa bond will be waived for nationals of competing countries who by April 15th purchased FIFA World Cup tickets and opted into the FIFA Priority Appointment Scheduling System, PASS, through the FIFA website, and demonstrate that they are otherwise fully eligible for a U.S. visitor visa, read the notice from the State Department, which framed the move as being part of Trump's commitment to hosting the biggest, best, and safest sporting event in World Cup history. The visa bond policy, according to the Trump administration, affects 50 countries whose nationals have traveled to the U.S. on legal visas, but frequently overstay their visas. As per the policy, the applicants are required to post bonds of up to $15,000 to attain a visa. This sum is refunded if they comply with the terms of the visa or if their visa application is denied. Aside from discussions over how people will get into the U.S., there are also concerns about the potential presence of Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, officers at matches. There is nothing that would preclude immigration enforcement from being able to go to an event. Jenny Murray, president of the National Immigration Forum, tells Time. Homeland Security Secretary Mark Wayne Mullen said last week that ICE and agents from Homeland Security Investigations, HSI, will be deployed at the World Cup to assist in dealing with criminal activity. When you have crowds this big, criminal activities follow, said Mullen, adding that ICE and HSI personnel will be out there every day fighting against the counterfeit tickets, human trafficking, drug smuggling, counterfeit products, working hand in hand with Customs and Border Protection, CBP, officials. He did not specify if agents will be carrying out actions aimed at detaining undocumented immigrants. Earlier in the month, Mullen was asked by CBS whether the mission at the World Cup will involve immigration enforcement. Well, ICE always says immigration enforcement. We're always going to do that. But we're not there solely for that purpose. We're in there to do our job, he said. We're not there to go round up mass individuals, but we are always looking for the worst of the worst. We're going to continue that. Amnesty International, alongside numerous civil organizations, has issued a travel advisory for people planning on traveling to the U.S. for the tournament. The organization argues that immigrant communities, racial and ethnic minority groups, and LGBTQ+ individuals continue to be disproportionately targeted and affected by the administration's policies, and as such are most vulnerable to serious harm when traveling to and or within the United States. The advisory urges people to alert family and friends of their World Cup plans and consult various nonprofit agencies for information about constitutional rights and protections when interacting with law enforcement in the U.S. Iran's participation sparks questions amid geopolitical tensions. Since the start of the Iran war in late February, there has been much speculation as to whether the country would compete in the tournament as planned. Paolo Zampoli, the U.S. Special Envoy to Global Partnerships, reportedly suggested that Italy, who failed to qualify, could take Iran's place instead. But FIFA said that Iran will play as scheduled at the World Cup, and officials from the Soccer Association met with the Iranian sporting officials in Turkey on May 16th to reaffirm the country's participation. Iran has always stood firm in its position that it will travel to North America for the tournament. We are going to the World Cup for which we qualified, and our host is FIFA, not Mr. Trump or America, said Mehdi Taj, president of the Iran Football Federation, in early May. FIFA has since confirmed that Iran has relocated its planned World Cup training base from the U.S. to Mexico amid security concerns against the backdrop of the war. Experts note that amid all the controversy and geopolitical tensions, there could end up being an U.S.-Iran soccer match. There's the possibility that if both the U.S. and Iran finish second in their groups, they play each other in the round of 32, said Wilson. This article is titled, Your Complete Guide to the 2026 FIFA World Cup, written by Calum Sutherland and Tiago Ventura, Time Magazine, May 27, 2026. The next article is from HuffPost and is titled, More Black Men Are Tuning Out Major Media Outlets by Philip Lewis, May 25, 2026. Black men who voted for former President Joe Biden in 2020 and then for President Donald Trump in 2024 have soured on the president, expressing concern about the president's leadership, the economy, and skyrocketing gas prices. But they're also frustrated with another group, the news media. The focus group, conducted on Wednesday by the Democratic firm Navigator Research, which HuffPost was allowed to view, revealed that these men have chosen to divest from what they believe are mainstream media outlets and largely get their news from non-traditional outlets and independent creators on platforms like YouTube. I used to watch a lot of mainstream news, but they've been bought out, said a 45-year-old black man from Decatur, Georgia. I go on YouTube, watch a lot of podcasters, independent, Joe Rogan, Midas Touch, I watch everything. Most of the men in the focus group cited social media as a primary source for news. Others mentioned local news stations and newspapers as more trustworthy platforms. A participant from Detroit mentioned that even though he primarily gets his news from YouTube and posters like Joe Rogan, he trusts his local Fox station. I don't believe half the stuff that CNN puts out, he explained. Another participant explained that while he still watches MS Now and CNN to gain a broader perspective on what's happening around the world, he leans towards independent journalists like Roland Martin because he feels they are more likely to tell the truth with no constraints. Mainstream media seems more controlled now. The big news outlets seem more controlled in what they can release to the public, the 55-year-old from Atlanta said. Their responses follow a broader trend of Americans who have lost trust in news outlets. A 2025 Gallup poll found the country's trust in mainstream media has dropped to a historic low of 28%. They also fit into growing Democratic worries about how to reach the voters who decide elections. Many Democratic donors and operatives rush to point the growing popularity of podcasts as a reason voters with an anti-established bent backed Trump in 2024, setting off an oft-mocked conversation with the push to find a liberal Joe Rogan. The focus group largely blames Trump for the country's dire state, citing a lack of leadership within the administration. I didn't agree with Obama, but he's an example of a good leader, said a participant from Atlanta. Pointing to Trump's billion-dollar anti-weaponization fund, he continued, as a leader, you don't put your self-interest first. You put your constituents' best interests first. Trump's poor leadership has a ripple effect, said the participant from Decatur, Georgia, adding, all Americans are being negatively affected by this administration. This article is titled, More Black Men Are Tuning Out Major Media Outlets by Philip Lewis, HuffPost, May 25th, 2026. The next article is from the Baltimore Health News, and it's about Dr. Thomas Azman, A-Z-M-A-N. Dr. Thomas Azman is a highly distinguished and world-renowned low vision specialist in Maryland and Virginia who dedicates his life to helping individuals from vision loss. Since 1975, he has been providing unique, comprehensive, advanced, low vision care to patients challenged by macular degeneration, diabetic retinopathy, glaucoma, albinism, RP, stroke, and other diseases. His patients come from all corners of the world. He travels extensively, treating patients as far as Australia and Thailand, and often lectures on the newest options for enhancing eyesight. Many patients have been told there is nothing that can be done for them, and eyeglasses will not help them see better. However, Dr. Asman has been able to help thousands of patients regain vision, independence, and a quality of life they could not have imagined. His patients are now able to read, write, paint, play cards, see and read a menu, recognize faces, watch television, read their computer screen, and enjoy live theater. He is known among his patients as the Miracle Eye Doctor. Dr. Asman's mission is to change the lives of patients who are experiencing reduced or significant vision loss and help them regain independence and quality of life. In addition to Dr. Asman's work with low vision patients, he also has developed a lens that help people with color blindness. People who suffer from color blindness still have the opportunity to see the world in a vibrant, accurate shades of color, thanks to the innovative color correction system for color blindness. This unique system of tests and filters provides a systemic approach to color blindness correction offered at Global Complex Eye Care, located near Baltimore, Maryland. The color correction examination consists of only one visit, which includes a comprehensive color vision evaluation and examination. This process takes about 8 hours on average and is done in one visit. The color correction process starts with a complete comprehensive eye exam and over 25 color vision tests. Based on information gathered about the specific color vision deficiency, individualized filters and lenses are designed that can be worn as colorblind contact lenses or colorblind corrective glasses. These filters change the wavelength of each color that goes into your eyes, effectively enabling you to see the world with more colors. Why do some people need treatment for color blindness? There are so many occupations that restrict colorblind people from joining them due to safety precautions and concerns. Some of these career paths include firefighters, railroad engineers, police officers, military personnel, Coast Guard officers, pilots, and more. In order to be able to serve in one of these positions, for example, people are required to pass the Ishihara Color Blind Test, ISHIHARA, or a similar color vision test. July is Dry Eye Month at Prevent Blindness, and their goal is to raise awareness and educate the public on eye conditions. We will be discussing more of this in next month's session from the African American Hour. To get additional information or to contact Dr. Asman, please call 1-443-470-9844. These were a series of articles I collected about some issues that I'm very passionate about. One of my best friends had suffered low vision from a stroke a few years ago, 10%, but with some glasses that she was able to obtain from Dr. Asman, she has been able to see faces, read, and experience life so different from the life she had before. During my research, I also found information about Dr. Asman and color blindness treatment, so that has also created an interest for me to get more information and share with you. I obtained articles from research and various medical journals and the Baltimore Health News For more information, please contact info@lowvisionmd.org or 1-866-269-3916. The next article is from the Griot and is titled, Allyson Felix's Return in Her 40s is About More Than Glory. It's About Longevity. Written by Kay Wicker, May 8th, 2026. In 2004, at the age of 18, Allyson Felix began her Olympic track career. In the over 20 years since, the sprinter has become the most decorated track and field athlete in the history of sport, with 5 different summer games and 31 total medals, 11 Olympic medals and 20 World Championship medals, led groundbreaking change towards equality in the sport for women, and launched a top-selling shoe brand, Saysh, S-A-Y-S-H, that puts mothers first. The next major accomplishment she set her sights on is returning to the sport in her 40s, and in the process proving that athletes, particularly black women athletes, aren't done when society thinks they should be. On Thursday, May 7th, during an appearance on The Today Show, she admitted that her return to track for the upcoming 2028 Summer Olympics in Los Angeles isn't just about glory, like the way a lot of outlets have framed it, but rather it's about proving longevity can exist well beyond what has largely been viewed as a prime athletic age. I think women, especially when we get to 40, there's this narrative that's being told of what we should be doing and maybe what we shouldn't be going after, the big, bold goal, and we should be slowing down. I'm just exploring what it looks like to not listen to that, she said. When she returns to the sport during the Olympics, which will take place in her hometown, the wife and mother of 2 will be 42. I've been so inspired, she said, of athletes like Lindsey Vonn, who made a comeback in her early 40s during the Winter Olympics. I was just so impacted in thinking about what is still possible, she continued. Felix has been able to draw inspiration from a mix of fellow athletes, as the Zennial and Millennial generations have been actively participating at increasingly higher rates and continue to pursue greatness in really demanding physical careers, from NBA legend LeBron James to tennis champion Venus Williams. At first, I felt like maybe there wasn't really permission to be able to do something like this at this age, she added, but then I was really encouraged to see so many other athletes really pushing the limits. At the age of 45, Venus returned to tennis in July 2025 at the DC Open and has since broken the record for the oldest woman to compete in the Australian Open in January. Meanwhile, at age 44, her sister Serena, after soft launching retirement, has been teasing a potential return to the sport. Shelley Ann Fraser Pryce, Fraser-Pryce, one of the fastest women in the world, only just officially wrapped things up at age 38 in 2025 with the World Athletics Championships in Tokyo. Then Olympic bobsledder Elena Meyers-Taylor, Meyes, at age 41, made history as the oldest woman to win an individual gold medal during the Milano-Cortina 2026 Winter Olympics. At 35, WNBA star Brittany Griner often lands on lists for athletes pushing the boundaries of age, in addition to figures like James and even Lewis Hamilton. While there are several different factors leading to more and more athletes aging gracefully, in particular, this generation of athletes at a really fantastic intersection of the evolution of sports science and wealth affording them greater physical autonomy. Culturally, Zennials and elder millennials have blown up a lot of older conventions and thinking about aging across the board. While on NBC News, Felix attributed the key difference to training and prep this time around. She also noted how she's doing this to show her children it's possible. I wanted to show my kids what it looks like to go after something, and it may not work out, but it's really the courage to try that. I want to demonstrate that for them. On Friday, May 8th, track and field star posted a video on Instagram in which she told her daughter she would be training for another Olympics. In the video, when Felix explains she's going to try her best to run again and try to make the team, her daughter responds, "I want to make the team." This article was titled, "Allyson Felix Return in Her 40s is about more than glory. It's about longevity," written by Kay Wicker, The Griot, May 8th, 2026. The next article is from Anscape and is titled, "Under Armour Taps Justin Jefferson as the Face of Its Football Future," written by Ian Stonebrook, Stonebrook, May 28th, 2026. Minnesota Vikings wide receiver Justin Jefferson has enjoyed an off-season on the fly. Attending the Met Gala earlier this month, Jefferson was dressed by a Brooklyn-based label who decides war in a one-of-a-kind deconstructed suit. Supporting the Minnesota Timberwolves, he kicked back courtside in Bottega Veneta trainers and Oakley sunglasses. Back in Baltimore, Under Armour, the brand tasked with outfitting Jefferson in season, follows and supports his every move. "The relationship is bigger than everybody thinks it is," Jefferson told Anscape when speaking on his partnership with Under Armour. "I tell them, I want to be unique. I want to stand out. This year, we wanted to do something different. As one of the top athletes at the brand, I wanted to expand it as much as I can. Implementing my swag into the footwear is something I take the initiative with. The initiative at Under Armour starts with the Bayou King Spotlight Icon Low, a personality-rich performance football cleat, co-crafted with Jefferson. Released on May 15th for $150, it is Jefferson's first player-exclusive launch this year. The colorful cleats sold out online in a matter of days, but the concept of implementing Jefferson's off-field swag into his game day gear was far from an overnight process. "We've been talking about that cleat for a while now," Jefferson said, reverting back to the Louisiana days. "The cleats are top tier with the textures. Animal print embossing, loud nods to New Orleans, and golden 4-foot spikes are all specific to Jefferson's journey and taste. Moreover, they are a far cry stylistically from Under Armour's black leather cleats that dominated high school football in the late 2000s, or even the triple white high tops quarterback Tom Brady wore in his final NFL season in Tampa Bay. It reflects how much of Jefferson's personal style is shaping what he puts on the field. Though Jefferson and Under Armour have previously collaborated on limited-run luxury-inspired cleats that sell for $750 on StockX, the Bayou King collection signals an extended focus on scale and apparel. Under Armour told me they want to expand the brand, Jefferson said. They understand fashion and want more drip. They've been listening to me. Eric Ogbogu, Ogbogu, Under Armour's director of grassroots marketing, is one of those senior leaders collaborating with Jefferson. He told Anscape the team plans to stretch it aesthetically because we have great players that we can sit down with and talk about what matters. Ogbogu understands this stretch, or rather shift, intimately. Having played football at the University of Maryland before a 7-year career in the NFL, the former All-ACC edge rusher found fame in 2003 as the main character in Under Armour's Protect This House commercial. In the years since, he's helped his former Terrapins teammate and Under Armour founder Kevin Plank, Plank, not just as a spokesperson for the Baltimore brand, but as a boots-on-the-ground advisor, providing an early forecast of football's future. It has changed, and it's going to continue to evolve, Ogbogu said. Our mission as a brand has been the same: make all athletes better. But that's truly understanding who he or she is. Jefferson sits at the center of how Under Armour reads today's athlete, emerging as its highest profile partner since Stephen Curry's departure last year. For a brand built on football, elevating Jefferson is a no-brainer. The 26-year-old phenom from Louisiana State University has amassed more than 1,000 receiving yards in each of his 6 NFL seasons, passing the 1,500-yard mark 3 times. In 2022, he was voted NFL's Offensive Player of the Year. Off the field, he's been referenced in the video game Fortnite and walked the runway for luxury fashion designer Thom Browne, Thombrowne. The duality of football grind and cultural cachet has positioned him as the inspiration and draw for Jets Flight School, a 3-day invite-only football camp for 20 of the nation's top-ranked high school wide receiver prospects. The camp's first edition was held at IMG Academy in Florida last summer, but earlier this month, the second edition was at Under Armour's Baltimore headquarters. He's introducing younger athletes into our brand. Chris Hatcher, Hatcher, Under Armour's Senior Manager of Global Brand Marketing for Team Sports, told Anscape. Jefferson's vision for the future of football, technically and aesthetically, begins with the camp, which he conceived, actively participates in, and at which the Bayou King cleats debuted. This month, Jets Flight School, and it's spelled JJETS, not only offered the next generation of projected NFL players lessons from Jefferson, but also gives them an up-close look at the past, present, and future direction of the Baltimore brand. It's amazing when you see these young kids at the camp, because they're coming to see Justin, Ogbogu said. We know we're right on par with how the athletes sees the products and sees themselves on the field. Jefferson's influence shows up in how Under Armour is evolving, with the modern game becoming faster, louder, and more style-driven. His input has become central to how the brand thinks about its product. That means taking notes and implementing ideas from top talent. They've been listening to me on what brings style and what people my age are attracted to, Jefferson said. The ideas are flowing, and it's been cool to see how things get created and finished. If Jefferson has a thought, it will be heard. If he endorses an item, it holds weight. He's inserting himself into our product lens, Hatcher said. It's a validator for ourselves across the football landscape, but across cross-categories into other spaces as well. The timing of Under Armour elevating Jefferson and further embracing his personal style is noteworthy. As part of the brand's attempts to reverse recent revenue declines, it is banking on the continued ascent of one of the NFL's most relevant cultural forces. In addition to personalized products and flagship camps, Jefferson is tasked with growing the game overseas, as seen by his recent tour of Asia. Brand sources told Andscape that Jefferson is a key figure in the international growth of flag football ahead of the sport's 2028 Summer Olympics debut as both an Under Armour and NFL partner. While abroad this spring, Jefferson met with the Chinese and Japanese flag football national teams, coached at camps, and visited flagship stores. Furthermore, Under Armour views Jefferson as an ambassador, capable of connecting with the expanding space of 7-on-7 competition and women's flag football. Justin can fit in all of those different lanes, Hatcher said. He's starting to become a global name who can resonate with those consumers across the pond. Still, Jefferson's vision for the game and his role within it trace back to his Louisiana roots. He grew up in St. Charles Parish, just outside New Orleans, before heading to Baton Rouge to suit up for the LSU Tigers. From there, his brand expanded across the field, the runway, and the global stage. Bayou King is one of many projects, Jefferson said. Going forward, it's going to get better and better. This coming season, you'll see different colorways and ideas that we've been putting work in. His influence is showing in what he wears on Sundays, where performance and personality are increasingly hard to separate. The same mindset is starting to shape his personal presentation and ultimately the overall look of the game. As Jefferson pushes that vision forward, Under Armour is following his lead, investing in the kind of athlete who can move between sport, style, and culture without separating the three. For Jefferson, it's less about a single cleat or collection and more about what comes next. Going forward, it's going to get better and better, he said. This article was titled, Under Armour Taps Justin Jefferson as the Face of Its Football Future, written by Ian Stonebrook. Andscape, May 28, 2026. Next, an article from The Root titled, A Peek Inside Keke Palmer's Cozy Hollywood Home, written by Chanel Genai, SHANELLE, June 1st, 2026. As if you needed yet another reason to love Keke Palmer, she recently decided to open the doors of her home for a new house tour with Architectural Digest, and this is the realest one we've seen yet. Unlike other homes that scream overt luxury and lavishness, Palmer's California ranch-style home is chic, cozy, modern, and truly feels like a fun visit to your favorite homegirl's house. There's tasteful decor, clear, stylish flair, but above all, this home feels like one you could actually see yourself chilling in. The kitchen. We start Palmer's home tour in her kitchen, which she said is very early sitcom inspired. Think a Lucille Ball, I Love Lucy kind of vibe, but trust and believe it still has stainless steel appliances for that up-to-date look. Beautiful breakfast nook. One of Palmer's favorite parts of her home is this bay window seating in her breakfast nook. According to the I Love Boosters star, the design edition is reminiscent of her time growing up in the Midwest. The dining room. The dining room isn't just a gathering spot for folks to enjoy meals. It's also a place to display a myriad of family photos and specific selfies that Palmer's mother, Sharon, thinks deserve to be seen. The living room. In the living room, there are multiple comfortable seating areas, including these curved chairs, the bar stools, 2 couches, The space also sometimes serves as the informal meeting spot for Palmer and Sharon to discuss business. The living room bay window. The Hustlers star keeps the bay window seating as a constant theme throughout her home. But this one in particular feels like a whole vibe, thanks to the drapery that helps it feel a bit more closed off and private. Another view of the living room. Remember those two comfy couches we mentioned? Well, here they are. Fun fact, the one to the right used to be in Palmer's bedroom before she decided to add one unorthodox item to her room, which took up a lot of space. Kiki's bedroom. Speaking of the master bedroom, Palmer's space is clean, organized, and stylish, and complete with a clothing stand to help her lay out all her outfits weekly. Who has time to think about what to wear every day? Kiki's bedroom Pilates reformer. Yes, you're looking at what you think you're looking at. That is a Pilates reformer machine, and it's right next to Palmer's bed. Why is that, you may ask? Well, it's because of the One of Them Days star loves Pilates. And what better way to squeeze in a little extra workout than when you're watching TV in your room? The master bathroom. When it comes to unwinding, Palmer's bathroom feels like one we can imagine ourselves in. She's curated a cozy oasis that includes room fragrances, body and skincare essentials, a towel warmer, and even a snack setup. The space screams self-care. The bathtub. Like we said, she's got everything in this bathroom. Candles, smell goods, a back pillow for some serious tub relaxation, and more. Little Leo's room. Of course, it wouldn't be a Palmer's home if it didn't have a room dedicated to her young son, Leo. Here, you can see there are multiple play areas and fun things to do in the space. Check out the jungle-inspired wallpaper, a designer choice Palmer said she picked to help play into his Leo the Lion persona. Leo's special bed. Watch out, world. Little Leo might be zooming through your home or down your hallways if he has his Lightning McQueen bed with him. This is too adorable. The media room. Last but certainly not least is Palmer's media room, a space where she and her family frequently gather to watch movies together. But they're not just limited to new releases. They can also watch old VHS tapes on the big screen. The space comes complete with Palmer's sister's curated selection of horror books and other fun things on the shelf. This article was titled, A Peek Inside Keke Palmer's Cozy Hollywood Home by Chanel Janai. The Root, June 1st, 2026. Next, another article from Anscape, titled, Mark Tatum Lays Out Basketball Africa League's Next Transition, written by Mark Spears, June 2nd, 2026. 6 seasons in the Basketball Africa League is now evolving into an actual league. Rwanda's RSSB Tigers won the 2026 BAL in their inaugural tournament season by defeating Angola's Pedro de Luanda 90-88 in the championship game in Kigali, Rwanda, on Sunday. Kigali is spelled Kigali, Rwanda Rwanda, on Sunday. After its inaugural 2021 season was held in a bubble in Kigali because of the coronavirus pandemic, the subsequent 5 BLL seasons took place across multiple locations in a tournament format. More than 110,000 fans attended BAL games this season, including record attendance for the group phase games in South Africa and Morocco. But more change is coming. The 2026 BAL Investor Summit and Innovation Summit took place May 22nd to 26th during the playoffs in Kigali and centered on the league's transition to a franchise model. The BAL plans to slow walk a shift from a tournament-based qualification system to a semi-closed franchise-based model with 10 permanent franchise teams and 2 annual qualifying slots. NBA Deputy Commissioner Mark Tatum said bids are being considered for the BAL from across the continent, with a quality arena needed in each location. Tatum added that there could be permanent franchises added, perhaps to the 2027 or 2028 BAL season. We're in the process now of transitioning the BAL from a completely open league and model where every year 12 different teams could participate in the league, Tatum told Anscape in a phone interview Monday. In order to qualify now, you have to win your national championship. So we basically take 12 national champions. And of course, those national champions can change every single year. So after the first 6 seasons, we've decided that now is the right time to transition the BAL from an open model to more of a franchise model and a semi-closed model. We think that is a reflection of the success of the league over its first 6 seasons and enormous growth opportunities that we see going forward for the league by having the addition of permanent franchises. So what permanent franchises will do is that they will create partners of ours who are going to invest in developmental opportunities in basketball in particular cities. The following is a Q&A with Tatum, in which he talks about the process of getting permanent franchises in the BAL, the good and challenging that comes with this new format, and how the BAL is helping the NBA prepare for NBA Europe, the projected cost of BAL franchises, the completed 2026 BAL season, which cities are ready to add franchises, African representation in the NBA Finals, and much more. A couple of Q&A sections from this interview. Can a current franchise buy into the BAL, or do they have to start from scratch? We're talking to a combination of existing franchises, some of which are playing in the BAL and have played in the BAL. People were represented there from Pedro de Luanda and Nairobi City Thunder. We're also talking to a group of investors who, some of them, have soccer clubs in Africa but want to invest in basketball. And some just see the opportunity to start a team from scratch or acquire an existing team. This article was titled, Mark Tatum Lays Out Basketball Africa League's Next Transition, by Mark J. Spears, Anscape, June 2nd, 2026. That's all the time we have for the African American Hour. My name is Rosemary Onkwe. Thanks for joining me.
Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have history from our friends at Mind's Eye. Following that, at 2 o'clock is episode number 4 of To Rescue the American Spirit by Brett Baer. And at 3 o'clock is New York Magazine. Stay with us for these readings and more.
This program is intended for a print-impaired audience and is brought to you by Mind's Eye.
This is the history segment. It's the week of June 1st. I'm Dave Miller, and sure appreciate you guys joining in here. So today, we're going to look back on what happened these days in history. And some of the events that happened on this week's day's worth of history are the first witch to be hanged, the TV program in 1977 that 500 million people tuned in for, the invention of the radio, anarchists who bombed 8 separate cities in the U.S. on the same day, the 74-game winning streak on your favorite game show, might guess what that is, and the start of the U.S. gas tax, as well as the start of the SEC. From the articles segment, we're going to look at presidential quotes regarding citizenship, just like we have been. We're going to take a refresher on what Thucydides' trap is. We're going to move to the magazine History Extra for an interesting article on why our earlier presidential candidates did not campaign, and we're going to then follow that with a deep dive into the origins of mob rule and organized crime. If we get time, we're also going to jump into the Stamp Act riots and how they laid the groundwork for the Revolutionary War. But let's get going on what happened in June 1st, 1533. One of our favorite queens, Anne Boleyn, very controversial lady. She was crowned Queen of England, 1533, 1812. The War of 1812, U.S. President James Madison asked Congress to declare war on the United Kingdom. 1974, Heimlich Maneuver for Rescuing Choking Victims is published in the Journal of Emergency Medicine. 2009, General Motors files for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. It is the 4th largest United States bankruptcy in history, one of the largest corporations in the world. What happened on June 2nd, 1692? Bridget Bishop is the first person to go to trial in Salem in the witch trials, and she is found guilty. She was hanged on June 10th. 1835, P.T. Barnum and his circus start their first tour of the United States. 1855, the Portland Rum Riot occurs in Portland, Maine. 1886, U.S. President Grover Cleveland marries Frances Folsom in the White House, become the only president to wed in the executive mansion. 1896, Marconi applies for the patent for his newest invention, the radio. 1910, Charles Rolls, co-founder of Rolls-Royce Limited, becomes the first man to make a nonstop double crossing of the English Channel by plane. 1919, anarchists simultaneously set off bombs in 8 separate U.S. cities. 1924, U.S. President Calvin Coolidge signs the Indian Citizenship Act into law, granting citizenship to all Native Americans born within the territorial limits of the United States. 1967, protests in West Berlin against the arrival of the Shah of Iran turn into riots, during which Benno Onnesford is killed by a police officer. His death results in the founding of the terrorist group Movement 2 June. 2003, Europe launches its first voyage to another planet, Mars. The European Space Agency's Mars Express probe launches from the Baikonur Space Center in Kazakhstan. 2004, Ken Jennings begins his 74-game winning streak on the syndicated game show Jeopardy! What happened on June 3rd, 1889? The first long-distance electric power transmission line in the United States is completed. It ran 14 miles between a generator at the Willamette Falls and then downtown Portland, Oregon. 1916, the National Defense Act is signed into law, increasing the size of the United States National Guard by 450,000 men. 1932, Lou Gehrig and his teammate Tony Lazzari hit 4 home runs in one game to hit for the natural cycle, respectively. These two feats are both less common than a perfect game, which has occurred 21 times in 120 years. 1940, World War II, the Battle of Dunkirk ends with a German victory, Allied forces in full retreat, and we remember from the last session that there were thousands of boat owners and ship owners that ended up bringing a flotilla to go pick up the Allied forces that were in retreat and saved the day. 1889, the government of China sends troops to force protesters out of Tiananmen Square after 7 weeks of occupation. We all know what happened after that. So what happened on June 4th, 1876? An express train called the Transcontinental Express arrives in San Francisco, California via the first transcontinental railroad only 83 hours and 39 minutes after leaving New York City. Imagine going from coast to coast in only 83 hours. 1913, Emily Davison, a suffragette, runs out in front of King George V's horse. The horse's name was Amner, by the way, at the Epsom Derby. She was trampled, never regained consciousness, and died a few days later. 1939, Holocaust, the MS St. Louis, a ship carrying 963 Jewish refugees, is denied permission to land in Florida, the United States, after being turned away from Cuba. Forced to return to Europe, more than 200 of its passengers later die in Nazi concentration camps. 1942, World War II, the Battle of Midway begins. Japanese Admiral Nagamu orders a strike on Midway Island by much of the Imperial Japanese Navy. 1944, a hunter-killer group of the United States Navy captures the German submarine U-505 at a time where U.S. Navy vessel had captured an enemy vessel at sea since the 19th century, the first time. 1974, during 10-cent beer night, what could go wrong there? Inebriated Cleveland Indian fans start a riot, causing the game to be forfeited to the Texas Rangers. 1989, the aforementioned Tiananmen Square protests are violently ended in Beijing by the People's Liberation Army. Remember how that ended? It was a tank. 1989, UFA train disaster. A natural gas explosion near Ufa, spelled UFA, don't know if I pronounced that right, I think I did, kills 575 as 2 trains passing each other throw sparks near a leaky pipeline. You can't make it up. What happened on June 5th? In the year 70, Titus and his Roman legions breached the middle wall of Jerusalem in the Siege of Jerusalem. 1851, Harriet Beecher Stowe's anti-slavery serial, Uncle Tom's Cabin, or Life Among the Lowly, starts a 10-month run in the National Era abolitionist newspaper. 1917, World War I. Conscription begins in the United States as Army Registration Day. 1956, our buddy Elvis Presley, he announced his new single, Hound Dog, on the Milton Berle Show. It scandalized the audience with his suggestive hip movements. 1968, U.S. presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy is shot at the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles, California by Palestinian Sirhan Sirhan. Kennedy died the next day. 1981, the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention report that 5 people in Los Angeles, California have a rare form of pneumonia seen only in patients with weakened immune systems. And that turns out to be the first recognized cases of AIDS. 2001, Tropical Storm Allison makes landfall on the upper Texas coastline as a strong tropical storm and dumps large amounts of rain over Houston. The storm cost $5 $8.5 billion damages, making the Allison the costliest tropical storm in U.S. history. June 6, 1752, devastating fire destroys one-third of Moscow, including 18,000 homes. 1844, Young Men's Christian Association, the YMCA, is founded in London. 1882, more than 100,000 inhabitants of Bombay are killed as a cyclone in the Arabian Sea pushes huge waves into the harbor. 50 years later, the Revenue Act of 1932 is enacted, creating the first gas tax in the United States at the rate of 1 cent per U.S. gallon sold. Right now, I think Illinois is tied for the first in the nation. It's almost $1 a gallon. Ouch. 1934, New Deal. U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt signs the Securities Act of 1933 into law, establishing the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC. 1944, World War II, Battle of Normandy begins. D-Day, its code name was Operation Overlord. It commenced with the landing of 155,000 Allied troops on the beaches of Normandy in France. The Allied soldiers quickly break through the Atlantic Wall and push inland in the largest amphibious military operation in history. 2002, Eastern Mediterranean event, a near-Earth asteroid, estimated at 10 meters diameter, explodes over the Mediterranean Sea between Greece and Libya. The resulting explosion is estimated to have a force of 26 kilotons, more powerful than the Nagasaki atomic bomb. 2005, United States Supreme Court upholds a federal law banning cannabis, including medical marijuana, in Gonzalez versus Rake. June 7th, 1099, the First Crusade, the siege of Jerusalem begins. 1494, Spain and Portugal sign the Treaty of Tordesillas, which divides the New World between two countries, Spain and Portugal. Didn't last long. 1654, Louis XIV is crowned King of France. 1862, United States and the United Kingdom agree to suppress the slave trade. 1899, American temperance crusader Carrie Nation begins her campaign of vandalizing alcohol serving establishment by destroying the inventory in a saloon in Kiowa, Kansas. 1905, Norway's parliament dissolves its union with Sweden. A vote is confirmed by a national plebiscite on August 13th of that year. 1942, World War II, the Battle of Midway ends victorious. 1977, 500 million people watch on TV as the high day of the Silver Jubilee of Queen Elizabeth II begins. 1981, the Israeli Air Force destroys Iraq's nuclear reactor during Operation Opera. The facility could have been used to make nuclear weapons. 1995, the long-range Boeing 777 enters service with United Airlines. 2006, Abu Zarqawi, the leader of al-Qaeda in Iraq, is killed in an airstrike by the United States Air Force. As we look back, certainly many consequential events during those days this week in our history. For the last couple of months, we've been doing quotes from our presidents regarding citizenship. We've had some really interesting quotes. All of these were gathered by the Hoover Institution, and they were pulled out of various presidential speeches. We concluded with George Bush. We're now to Donald Trump in his first term. First quote, "As Americans and American citizens, we are bound together in love, loyalty, and friendship and affection. We must look out for each other, care for each other, and as always act in the best interest of our nation and all citizens living here today. We love each other. We are proud of each other." That was President Trump at a naturalization ceremony on January 19th, 2019. Second quote, "The beauty and majesty of citizenship is that it draws no distinctions of race or class or faith or gender or background. No matter where our story begins, whether we are the first generation or the 10th generation, we are all equal. We are one team and one people proudly saluting one great American flag." Also from the same naturalization ceremony on January 19th, 2019. Third and last is the remarks from his farewell address to the nation on January 19th, 2021. And that begins, "As long as the American people hold in their hearts deep and devoted love of country, then there is nothing that this nation cannot achieve. Our communities will flourish, our people will be prosperous, our traditions will be cherished, our faith will be strong, and our future will be brighter than ever before." End of quote. Our last presidential quote will be next week from Joe Biden. Okay, next we're going to flip over to the articles and we're going to address the question of what is a Thucydides trap. This is published in History.com from Leslie Kennedy, and it was published May 18th, 2026, and it basically begins with the concept of the Thucydides trap, appears often in modern discussions of U.S.-China relations, but its roots date back to ancient Greece. At its core, the term describes an idea when a rising power begins to challenge a ruling one, tensions grow, fears set in, and the risk of war increases. So we begin with who was Thucydides. 460 BC to 400 BC. He was an Athenian general and historian who wrote about the Peloponnesian War between Athens and Sparta in the 5th century. He wrote, quote, "The growth of power of Athens and the alarm which this inspired in Sparta made war inevitable." According to Harvard political scientist Grant Allison, who coined the phrase Thucydides trap in 2012, Thucydides focused on the deeper forces driving war. In a 2015 article in The Atlantic, Allison wrote that Athens' growing influence made it more confident and more sensitive to slights, where Sparta saw Athens' behavior as unreasonable and threatening. Allison brought the term into modern foreign policy discussions through research at Harvard Kennedy's School of Belfer Center. His team studied 16 cases from the past 500 years when a rising power challenged an established one. All but 4 led to war. Allison summarizes these examples and expands on the concept in his 2017 book, Destined for War: Can America and can China Escape Thucydides' Trap? Allison points to the 1914 assassination of Archduke Ferdinand, which helped start the chain of events that led to World War I, as an example of how a relatively contained occurrence can lead to a major conflict. The cases also include France challenging Habsburg dominance in the 17th century, which contributed to the 30-Year War. Japan's early 20th century rise against the U.S. that culminated in the Pacific War during World War II. The Thucydides trap has become a recurring theme in high-level diplomacy. President China Xi Jinping has brought it up in meetings with U.S. presidents and leaders, including Barack Obama in 2015, Joe Biden in 2024, and Donald Trump in 2026. During a 2015 summit in Seattle, Xi said there is no such thing as the so-called Thucydides trap in the world. But he warned that major powers can create one if they, time and again, make the mistakes of strategic miscalculation. Can China and the United States transcend this so-called Thucydides trap and forge a new paradigm for major power relations? Xi repeated during a 2026 meeting with Trump in Beijing. Allison and many political leaders stress that a Thucydides trap is a warning that rising tensions will make conflict more likely, but not unavoidable. The Belfer Center case studies in which war was avoided included the United States overtaking Britain in the early 20th century because Britain stepped back rather than confront the United States directly. The Cold War rivalry between the U.S. and Soviet Union did not turn hot thanks to deterrence and diplomacy. And in the 15th century, Portugal and Spain managed their conflict through treaties instead of fighting. When the parties avoided war, Allison writes in The Atlantic, it required huge, painful adjustments in attitudes and actions on the part of not just the challenger, but also the challenged. End of article. We're now going to jump over to History Extra. This is the February 2026 issue, and we're going to go to page 21. We're going to read an article entitled, Early U.S. Presidential Candidates Didn't Campaign. And the prelude is that in an era where candidates are expected to remain silent and appear disinterested, James Garfield was the first to speak directly to voters. This was written by James Osborne. It begins, when James Garfield reluctantly accepted the Republican nomination for president in June 1880, he stepped into a fraught political culture that was governed by a strict code of restraint. Back then, a presidential candidate shouldn't appear eager for the job. Publicly courting votes was distasteful, demeaning, and incompatible with the dignity of the office. As C.W. Goodyear, author of President Garfield, if you are interested in the job, it's not for you. Campaigning was delegated to party operatives, loyal newspapers, and traveling surrogates. The candidate was supposed to stay out of the public view, maintaining lofty neutrality. It was seen as being desperate and pathetic for a presidential candidate to go rally voters. Garfield, it seemed, never intended to become a nominee, let alone president. Yet, as Goodyear explains, Garfield's election campaign marked a turning point, upending the long-standing taboo against candidates speaking directly to voters. The expectation that candidates should remain silent was rooted in early Republican ideals from the 18th century, when American colonies had won their independence from Britain. The Founding Fathers had worried that unrestrained electioneering might debase public life and turn politics into a petty spectacle. As the U.S. expanded, parties mobilized voters while candidates remained above the fray. In 1880, Garfield, a former Union general, lawyer, minister, and congressman, was a reluctant candidate. He was forced into standing as a compromise in a divided Republican Party. After his unsought nomination in the 1880 Republican National Convention, he returned to a bucolic home life in his farm in Mentor, Iowa, where he lived with his wife, Lucretia, and their children to observe those rules of political propriety. Instead, his farm became the focus of national attention. With mass political participation on the rise and expanding railroad network, voters saw a rare opportunity to meet a potential candidate. In particular, says Goodyear, legions of black voters, wannabe women voters who didn't have the right to vote yet, an industrialist group, turned out. This placed Garfield in an awkward position. Addressing them risked violating the taboo against campaigning directly with voters. But refusing to greet visitors would also appear cold and inhospitable. Backed into a corner, Garfield chose courtesy. He fed and spoke with visitors, and in doing so, he inadvertently invented the front porch campaign, as it later became known. Garfield goes out onto his front porch, and he gives all these impromptu speeches to these visitors. They were informal and conversational, in contrast to the scripted, lofty communications previously defining presidential races. For many Americans, this was the first time they had heard a presidential candidate address national issues directly. Newspapers reprinted his remarks, and political operatives recognized that Garfield had found a way to engage with voters without appearing to pursue them. It was seen as being very revolutionary. It was not uncontroversial, says Goodyear. But Garfield was able to get around this by insisting, I I'm not going out to talk to these people. I am not asking them to vote for me. They are knocking on my front door. What am I to do? Senior Republicans debated how much visibility Garfield could risk without undermining the decorum of the office. Democrat-backing newspapers accused him of courting spectacle. One senior Republican, Senator James Blaine, later observed that until this point, to have a presidential candidate comment on current events and issues and his own opinions on them was seen as demeaning beneath the office. Now, expectations of campaigning had shifted. Garfield spoke fluently and without notes. He adjusted his tone to suit farmers and industrial workers, veterans, and reform groups. Crucially, because he never left a mentor, he could credibly claim that he was not campaigning in the traditional sense, and that helped him. Garfield's presidency was brief, though. He served only a few months before being shot by the delusional assassin Charles Guiteau. He died from that infection in September 1881. But the front porch campaign strategy format became an accepted political end, and through the early 20th century, the distance between candidates and voters continued to shrink. The presidential role has evolved, too, becoming more of a partisan figure than the founding fathers envisioned. End of article. In the last few weeks, our articles have revolved around, lost civilizations or cities, etc., often going back to ancient Egypt and further. This time I wanted to stay a little bit more in America and still travel the world by going into an article called Mob Rule. And the prelude is that the 20th century was a golden age for organized crime groups. Ryan Gingeris reveals how gangs from the Sicilian Mafia to Mexico's cartel capitalized on political chaos, economic upheaval, and mass migration to spread their tentacles around the world. This was also published in History Extra, February 2026. The article begins, in the early 1860s, Sicily was incorporated into the Kingdom of Italy. Soon after, the visitors to the island discovered what they believed was a criminal fraternity at work in Palermo and its environments. The fraternity, the Mafia, possessed secret rights and bylaws that governed its members. Chief among them were the rules of the vow of silence and when it came to their interactions with police. Many assumed this honored society was born out of the prisons of Palermo, a place where hardened criminals mixed with the members of the secret revolutionary organizations. Before 1990, mafiosi distinguished themselves by a clear pattern of criminal behavior. Brigand gangs who robbed travelers on the road were bound to the mafia. Large landowners and government officials abetted the murders, thefts, and acts of extortion that those mafiosi committed. Yet there were aspects of the mafia that remained difficult to pin down. Mafioso Palermo's mayor told one public inquiry could be anyone who has self-respect and a certain exaggerated pride and the inclination not to be overwhelmed but overwhelm others, the will to appear courageous and be ready to fight, and so on. For people in the 19th century, what made Sicily's mafia significant was the threat it posed to the government in Rome. Mafioso appeared to rule the island from the shadows. The violence associated with them was used to intimidate citizens and demonstrate its power to the Italian capital. In the global context, the Sicilian mafia seemed to be part of the pattern. Other secret organizations were challenging states and empires in the hopes of winning self-rule or overthrowing governments. By the start of the 20th century, commentators outside of Italy began characterizing nationalist guerrillas, anarchists, and other revolutionaries as mafias in their own right. Colloquially speaking, the word mafia is often used as shorthand for groups involved in organized crime. But not every gang enjoyed the distinction of being called a mafia. Genuine mafias possess gravitas and did not come and go. They possess a culture, history, or pedigree that adds to their status. Their mythos overshadows the exploits or dangers of the common criminal. The term mafia is quite old. Use the word dates back centuries in Italy, even though its meaning and significance has evolved. Even Sicilians' mafia historically meant a kind of boldness. A mafioso specifically denoted someone who was domineering or bragging of their strength and power. Scholars tend to agree that the Sicilian mafia is one of four historic mafias to endure to this day. The other three, the Camorra, which emerged in Naples, China's Triads, and the Yazuku in Japan, have similarly rich backstories. In each case, the development of these groups or subcultures speaks to their cultural roots. Subcategory: intimidating opponents. Under Sicily's mafia, Yazuku culture spanned much of Japan. From the Middle Ages forward, Japanese elite relied upon clan members to manage or mitigate crime within their midst. Violence was a key to Yazuku culture, as were intricate tattoos and rituals. Later, the Meiji Restoration, 1868, and the establishment of a modern state, political operatives sought Yazuku support in the hopes of intimidating their opponents. Yakuza became integral to the radicalization of Japanese politics, a process that eventually led the nation into World War II. Neither crime nor politics gave birth to China's Triads. Their history dates to the country's tradition of secret mystical societies. A feature of this was the way fraternal organizations promoted folk religion and mutual aid for China's rural underclass. With the Manchu conquest in the 17th century, these organizations morphed into secret societies associated with the opposition to the government. The establishment of the Qing dynasty, 1644 to 1912, led to the creation of a group calling itself the Three United Society, from which the term triad was coined. The number of triad-derived groups rose as the Manchu rule grew increasingly more unpopular in the 19th century. To sustain themselves, many secret societies resorted to theft, extortion, and the sex trade. Adding to the strength and mysticism of the triads were rich customs and a hierarchical structure involving initiations. After the fall of the Queen in 1912, secret societies expanded their influence over much of China, in many cases forming de facto governments over the countryside. Europe's fragmented political landscape did not produce much in universal criminalized societies. To understand the growth of the Camorra, we need to begin with the 18th century Freemasonry. This provided a critical model for the organization of the subversive groups. Political radicals embraced its cult and secrecy and hierarchy in building movements aimed at national liberation or revolution. In the port city of Naples, rather less idealistic figures also took inspiration as the main within the prison. Inmates in the early 19th century began to mimic Masonic traditions in crafting secret codes and rules. Outsiders called this budding culture Camorra, a possible allusion to the chamorra or jackets they wore. Camorra culture gradually exited the prison, finding members among the impoverished of Naples. With the threat of nationalist revolution threatening the city of the establishment of political leaders in Naples, they relied on the Camorra as informants and enforcers. Similarly, the mafia in Sicily, the Camorra monopolized and exploited the underworld of Naples as extortionists and smugglers. They formed alliances with business leaders, politicians, and police. They became part of the city's elite. Then they came to America. Each of these cultures initially operated as provincial conspiracies. Yet, in the late 19th century, an era of mass migration, this changed. Like the millions of other people leaving Asia and Europe, triads, Camorras, Yakuza, and mafiosos sailed abroad. Many settled in the United States where they fell into familiar patterns of behavior. This was a phenomenon Americans recognized almost immediately. In the run-up to the new century, newspapers took a keen interest in what they believed were vast immigrant strategies and conspiracies. Urban areas appeared to develop new underworlds as the vice trade came along in control of the Chinese fraternal lodges, often referred to as the Tongs. Japanese gamblers formed violent gangs on the West Coast. Italian extortionists known as Black Hands became the scourge of communities across the U.S. Tabloids feasted on these revelations and fanned anti-immigrant sentiment. But an occasional offense could be forgiven, as one Mississippi editor put it, quote, "When foreign groups transport and carry on here their tongs, mafias, vendettas, class enmities, and hostilities, it is a disturbance of such alien and bloody character that America is not obliged to endure it and should not." Like activists in other parts of the Western culture, crusaders in the U.S. grew fearful of the effect gambling and prostitution had on society. Increased use of alcohol and narcotics similarly concerned advocates for women's rights and children's welfare. Dispensing these goods and services were organized crimes, in quotes, insofar as each required an illicit chain of suppliers, dealers, and consumers. With the West in the lead, lawmakers around the world agreed to take more stringent steps to combat vice at home. As the world's biggest economy and country left largely unscarred by both the First and Second Wars, America assumed the leading role in this movement. Sorry about the page turner. Domestically, attempts to clamp down on the use of alcohol and narcotics catalyzed these changes in American underworld. Early beneficiaries of the prohibition were individuals who shared connections to mafia and Camorra traditions. They created a system of families that held sway over bootleg liquor and vice across swaths of the country. Newspapers and newspaper reels captured their ascendancy, as did early talkies such as Scarface, 1932. Al Capone embodied this movement in his dress, cant, swagger, and flair for the newspaper. Newspapermen loved him. His whole demeanor, one journalist noted, is that of an overgrown child. Capone could easily persuade a know-nothing stranger that he was as harmless as a big St. Bernard dog. If the modern mafioso was his father, it would be him. It was only in retrospect, however, that the American authorities conceived of bootleggers as a part of a distinctly American mafia. Heroin streamed across the Atlantic and Pacific into newly prosperous USA, a trade left by old and new syndicates. Triad link groups traded in heroin cultivated in Burma and processed in Hong Kong. Meanwhile, Corsican syndicates, such as the Sicilian Mafiosa, exported even larger amounts of dope from Turkey and Lebanon. This later French connection drew the attention of Washington's top narcotics officer, Harry Anslinger. In the 1950s, the Federal Bureau of Investigation of Narcotics long lived in the shadow of J. Edgar Hoover's FBI. This fact roiled Anslinger so much that he went on the offensive. Amid a climate of growing paranoia, Anslinger's FBN seized the national spotlight with a series of fantastic revelations. Through televised senatorial hearings, government witnesses testified to the criminal conspiracy extending beyond the USA. In its heart were the rights and traditions of Sicily's mafia. American crime families, in coordination with the syndicates abroad, dominated the global narcotics industry. In 1963, Anslinger's star witness, Joseph Valachi, added explosive touches to its proceedings. Valachi, a one-time New York gangster, confirmed the existence of a singular criminal culture. Members, he claimed, called it Costa Nostra, our thing. Valachi's story reverberated worldwide. America, it seemed, had its own mafia, one that led the world in a host of nefarious dealings. Meanwhile, older mafias abroad were experiencing their own renaissance. The rise of fascism and the outbreak of war in 1939 inflicted devastating losses on the gangsters of Naples and Sicily. Similarly, the triads and the Yakuza gangs suffered at the hands of invading armies and collapsed governments. Yet, with the restoration of peace, a new generation took advantage of the emerging post-war environment. They formed partnerships with local organized reconstruction efforts. Yakuza and mafiosa found common cause within the right-wing political parties that feared the growing popularity of the leftist movements. Above all, Italian, Chinese, and Japanese gangsters realized unprecedented opportunities to profit from the narcotics trade. This changed the character of the older criminal fraternities. Mafioso of earlier time, as one Sicilian don saw them, were dignified people, gentlemanly, and inherently good. Narcotics trafficking and the riches that came with it often warped and diminished the character of those involved. The idea of a life of crime impacting on the gang members themselves was popularized in the work of American-Italian novelist Mario Puzo. By his own account, Puzo had no particular affinity for crime stories, but when he was looking for a subject with wide appeal, he remembered Valachi's testimony and began researching mob history. Puzo's novel, The Godfather, in 1969, sold millions of copies. Then, Alien Paramount Studios bought the rights, and the head production, Bob Evans, took a chance in hiring a young Francis Ford Coppola to direct the cinematic version. The film, released in 1972, took the Academy Award for Best Picture and racked up millions at the box office. At no point do the characters in The Godfather utter the word mafia. Viewers and critics, however, understood the film, and they offered a close dissection of the phenomenon. The movie fulfilled the audience's expectation. Consciously or not, as one French critic said, people are inclined to believe that the true princes who govern us are hidden masters, all-powerful but anonymous. The Godfather and its 1974 sequel changed how gangsters talked and how they went about their work. Even before 1972, mafioso in Sicily began to refer to their secret society as La Cosa Nostra. After The Godfather, they began calling their partners, their betters, padrinos, which was a term used in the film. Around the world, criminal groups started referring to their leaders as godfathers, or some translation of the word, and began to mimic the organizational structure from the film. Life intimated art. Coppola's Opus arrived in cinemas at a time where the international drug trade was rapidly growing. Heroin consumption began at peak in the U.S. and started a rise in Western Europe. Cocaine, previously a boutique drug, began to appear in greater amounts in U.S. cities. Newer criminal groups emerged too. Before the end of the 1970s, 2 cocaine trafficking coalitions took place in Colombian cities of Medellin and Cali. Parallel developments in Mexico also gave birth to a similar alliance of drug smugglers known as the cartels from Guadalajara. Some of the press initially referred to these groups as mafias. Law enforcement took the calling them cartels due to their perceived similarity to the petroleum consortium OPEC. That was a later name that took hold. A key figure was Pablo Escobar of Medellin. Having dabbled in smuggling as a youth, his reputation for violence sealed his close ties to his landowners and drug runners. He drew inspiration from The Godfather and mimicked the slow manners and long silences of Marlon Brando's performance. Escobar, however, was far more brutal than the fictitious Vito Corleone. His cartel murdered thousands, including some 200 judges and 700 police officers. Escobar's death at the hands of the Colombian security forces in 1993 marked the end of the Medellin cartel. The cocaine trade, however, lived on. Cases across the Pacific spoke to the increased activity among the Yakuza and the Triads. In the wake of The Godfather, exposés in Western media took particular interest in how Japanese and Chinese gangsters compared to Western crime syndicates. For many journalists, Asia's mafias appeared more malevolent and exotic. The secret rights of the Yakuza and the Triads made their involvement in the drug trade seem more difficult to police. No one querying the world of the Japanese gangster failed to mention their intricate tattoos, the katana swords with which they often fought, or severing of the pinkies as acts of contrition. The press made each of the supposed triad penalties death by 5,000 thunderbolts and the flowing of blood from the body's 5 openings. Meanwhile, the sheer number of supposed mafias surged during the 1980s and 1990s. Increased cocaine production in Latin America touched off upheaval in Colombia and Mexico, leading to unprecedented waves of violence as governments pushed back. The fragmentation of cartels existed. As smuggling new routes grew more complex, Jamaican and Nigerian groups grew in influence. Street gangs such as the Bloods and the Crips metastasized across the U.S., specializing in the retail drug trade. The dissolution of the Eastern Bloc had even more dramatic consequences. The sudden liquidation of state-owned industries across the former Soviet Union forged a series of unholy alliances between the presumptive oligarchs and the gangs. Other syndicates comprising Chechens, Albanians, Kurds, Serbs, and Turks came to cast a shadow over different parts of Europe. The emergence of these groups led political leaders across the world to see their collective security in a new light. As the new century dawned, the United Nations formed a convention dedicated to combating transnational organized crime. To mark the occasion, signatories assembled for a ceremony in Corleone, the Italian birthplace of Puzo's fictional godfather. Throughout this period, mafia may have been a byword for describing the groups emerging in the West. The ease in which commentators referred to the Russian, Albanian, Nigeria, or Turkish mafias obscured the fact that no single group anchored in their creation. Popular culture helped cement the impression that mafias were a global phenomenon. During this process, the narrative around organized crime moved far beyond the 4 historical mafias. Indeed, you could plausibly argue that such terms as gangsters, organized crime, and the mafia have become interchangeable. So does the term mafia still have special meaning and power? Yes, in that it encompasses a world where gangsters don't just operate in the criminal sphere, somehow separated from the rest of society, but influence politics, commerce, culture, and even international affairs. Without mafias, history since the late 19th century would have been very different. Mafias may operate in the shadows, but shining a light on them helps us see the past more clearly. End of article. Well, now let's fall back a couple of hundred years. We're going to go to an article in History.com from Christopher Klein and look at how the Stamp Act riots really laid the groundwork for the Revolutionary War. The measure that imposed a tax on all printed materials inspired widespread outrage and even violence among the colonists. And there is an image that accompanies the article, and it's entitled "The Stamp Act Riots in New York." And it shows it's a black and white pencil drawing, shows people, including children and dogs, rallying around a person with a big bass drum, striking both sides of it, and then men on horses, people running, lots of action, lots of folks holding up guns in the air, and people talking earnestly amongst each other, another man blowing a bugle. This is published August 14th, 2015. It begins, Andrew Oliver couldn't have been excused if he didn't feel very welcome in his hometown of Boston. After awakening on August 14, 1765, the wealthy 59-year-old merchant and provincial official learned that his effigy was hanging from a century-old elm tree in front of Deacon Elliott's house. After dusk, angry Bostonians paraded Oliver's likeness through the streets and destroyed the brick building he had recently built along the waterfront. In case Oliver still hadn't received the hint, the mob beheaded his effigy in front of his finally appointed home before throwing stones through his windows, demolishing his carriage house, and imbibing the contents of his wine cellar. Oliver had become the public's enemy after news arrived from England weeks earlier that he would be responsible for the local implementation of a reviled law imposed by the British government called the Stamp Act. It was approved by Parliament on March 22nd, 1765. The measure imposed a tax on all printed materials for commercial and legal use, including wills and deeds, newspapers and pamphlets, and even playing cards, as a means to pay for the deep debt Great Britain had incurred protecting the American colonies from French and Native American forces during the 7 Years' War, which ended in 1763. The Stamp Act also denied offenders a trial by jury because colonists had the habitual tendency to find their smuggling peers not guilty. The Stamp Act was the first direct tax on internal commerce rather than a duty on external trade goods imposed on the American colonies, and it had colonists who believed their only representative assemblies could levy direct taxes in an uproar. When news of the Stamp Act arrived in May, newly elected Patrick Henry railed against the law in the Virginia House of Burgesses and led the adoption of the radical Virginia Resolves. It denied the right of an unrepresented parliament to tax the colonies. In Boston, opposition moved from a fiery rhetoric to an inflamed violence, fanned by a secret organization known as the Loyal Nine. The clandestine group of artisans and shopkeepers printed pamphlets and signs protesting the tax and incited the mob that ransacked Oliver's house. The Stamp Act commissioned colonial distributors to collect a tax in exchange for handing out the stamps to be affixed to documents, and Oliver, without his knowledge, had been appointed as the distributor for Massachusetts. The day after his property was destroyed, Oliver resigned the position he never asked for and one he'd never held, since the Stamp Act wasn't due to take effect on November 1. The resignation, however, didn't douse the violent protests in Boston. On August 26, another mob attacked the home of Oliver's brother-in-law, Lieutenant Governor Thomas Hutchison. The rioters stripped the mansion, one of the finest in Boston, of its doors, furniture, paintings, silverware, and even the slate from its roof. Similar riots broke out in seaports from Portsmouth, New Hampshire to Savannah, Georgia, forcing the resignations of the Crown-appointed mob of the officials. Mobs turned away ships arriving from Great Britain with stamp papers. The Loyal Nine expanded and became known as the Sons of Liberty, which formed local committees of correspondence to keep abreast of protests throughout the colonies. In October, delegates from the 9 colonies traveled to New York to attend the Stamp Act Congress, which drafted a Declaration of Rights and Grievances that affirmed only colonial assemblies had the constitutional authority to tax the colonists. Merchants in seaports such as Boston, New York, and Philadelphia united to boycott British imports, which prodded British merchants to lobby for the Stamp Act's repeal. The intimidation campaign and boycott worked. November 1 arrived, the mass resignations of the stamp distributors impeded the administration of the tax. In many parts of the colonies, printers proceeded with business as usual. When it proved impossible to implement the Stamp Act, Parliament repealed it almost a year to the day after it approved it. However, it also passed the Declaratory Act to reaffirm its authority to pass any legislation impacting the colonies. When the news of the Stamp Act's repeal reached Boston in May, the Sons of Liberty returned to the elm tree from which they dangled Oliver's likeness, this time to hang celebratory lanterns, not effigies, from its mighty boughs. Every year on August 14th, the Sons of Liberty gathered under the shade of the elm, where they christened the Liberty Tree to commemorate the 1765 protest. The issue of taxation without representation continued to fray the relations between the American colonies and the mother country over the next decade until war broke out in 1775. During that summer, British soldiers and loyalists under siege in Boston took axes to the Liberty Tree and chopped it into firewood. Although the tree was missing when the Patriots returned to Boston after the British evacuation, they still gathered around its stump on August 14, 1776, to commemorate the protest from 11 years earlier that was one of the first rebellious steps on the path to revolution. The Sons of Liberty also never forgot Andrew Oliver, whose reputation improved little among Boston's patriots after becoming lieutenant governor in 1770. When Oliver passed away 4 years later, a Sons of Liberty delegation was at his gravesite to give 3 cheers as his coffin was lowered into the ground. Okay, that takes care of our last article there, and appreciate you joining. This is the history segment, and we will look forward to chatting again with you next week. Take care.
Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have episode number 4 of To Rescue the American Spirit by Bret Baier. Following that, at 3 o'clock, is the New York Magazine. Following that, at 4 o'clock, is the Blindness and Disability News Hour from Mind's Eye. Stay with us.